the
opposite side.
Yeah.
Right.
It's switched
So
around.
this is Cypress Hill. Okay, it is the home of Peter Fontaine Armistead from Virginia, just off of 43. And she is first cousin of Dolly Madison and second cousin of Patrick Henry.
Wow.
Now, what are they doing here? Well, you've got to ask yourself a couple of questions. This is the frontier of Alabama, and it's wild. Eventually gaining much more, but interesting enough, believe that the house was constructed in the mid-20s. Not real sure what they lived in prior to that. Could have been log houses built on the plantation. But we know the original house is what you see, the main original house. And from early pictures like that one, it had 4 chimneys. It had a dog trot with a center hall. This has got like a parlor in the front. But originally, these dog trot houses had 2 big rooms on either side, and therefore each room had a fireplace. So that's what you're looking at. The style comes out of Virginia, off the Tidewater, the coast of Virginia, and some refer it to simply as the Virginia style, which the Kroger home is, a Virginia style. Notice it has dormers, but I don't think the dormers are in that photo, are they?
I don't remember.
Remember that? Who has the photo? A lot of people don't understand that in this part of Alabama in the 1800s, there were not a lot of luxuries. You know, to be able to afford columns like the Forks of Cypress, that was unheard of. And even though this family came out of Virginia and came with money, to have the money to build a house was out of the question. So this was a standard. This was even a more elegant house than others because a lot of the original houses were long. And John Coffey's house was a 2-story, 4-room log house that they put clapboard on and enlarged it as the family grew. But the original house was a 2-story, 4-room log house. So you had Jackson's here, Armistead's here, and Hood's down here. This triangle, Woodlawn. Yeah, that's the one that's across from the lovely downtown landfill. You can barely see it back off of the wood. But can you imagine living in 1818, 1819, 1820, and communicating between the coasts? It all had to be done on horseback. Now, I think I told you this, but eastern Colbert County and western Lauderdale share a geological formation called Decatur soil. That soil is some of the richest soil in all of Alabama, other than the Black Belt. And that's why the larger plantations were around the Leeton area, Cortland, Leeton, and here, in what's called the Bend. This is where the river makes that big bend going back up towards Savannah and Paducah, Kentucky. Makes that weird bend. Because you know rivers normally follow north-south. But there are only a couple of rivers that come down and then go west and then go back up northwest. That's very rare, unusual. And before the Pickwick backed it up. So we know that in a treaty with the American Indians in 1816, Colbert's Reserve, George Colbert lived across the river, Colbert's Reserve included 20,000 acres, of which Mary Ann Coger was a loyal member and a faithful worker until her death in that church. Their son William was listed also later as a planter doctor. So one of their sons became a physician. In 1850, their property, and they're not listed on your plantation records. You got that packet. In 1850, the property value of the planters, excluding slaves now, as follows. Neil Ryle's plantation, not counting his slaves, was for $35,000. Key was 20, Peters 34, Collier 14.5, Coger 11.5. Now you got to say, but wait a minute, all that land, all this property, and all its work, a lot of people devalue their property when it comes to paying taxes. Excluding, notice I said excluding slave property. So when you included slave property, and at that time, you had to pay taxes on both. But if you go back and search the records down at the Alabama Archives, or you can do it online now, you go back and search the records, you'll notice that the slaves were included on the agricultural census, along with crops and livestock. There is an old word called chattel, C-H-A-T-T-E-L, which means same as cattle. Slaves could be bought, sold, and traded, like a cow or a mule.
Like Harry said, my name is Brooke. My husband Will and I stumbled on the opportunity to purchase Mapleton about 18 months ago, and it had been vacant for about 12 years before we were able to get in and kind of see it, and I don't think many people had seen it. So like I said, we kind of stumbled on the opportunity to buy this house, and we knew it was special and significant to the history of Florence, but we really didn't know in what capacity. So I read several of the books, and was pretty limited history that I could find. And so I started a journey of digging to see what I could figure out. So I will tell you as much as I can remember. If you have any questions, please ask me. We know this home was built in 1826. And I'll go ahead and tell you the way I found it was 1826. A gentleman named George Coulter built this home. He was from Virginia. He was an attorney. He actually had a degree from Washington University, which was very uncommon in that time. And he kind of moved on the frontier. So he traveled to Tennessee, to Madison, and then he moved over to this area. He was law partners with McKinley for a while. Seemed kind of like, maybe a hot shot. And I think this house was probably a way to try to show off for him. And unfortunately, he lived a little higher than what he could afford. And so by the end of the project, he was being sued by quite a few people. So I found the court record where the carpenter had testified, and he talks about beginning work in 1826. So we think it was probably 1826 to about 1828 with the construction. So that does make it one of the older homes in Florence, and we're very fortunate because the interior for the most part is unchanged. So a lot of the floor is original, a lot of the trim work is original, even the thresholds. We've had to do a little bit of work, but a lot of this on the inside is from the 1820s. So after he built the home, I don't know that he even got to live in it. It actually got mortgaged back to Cypress Land Company. And there was a few years that I'm not sure what happened, but then Virginia Foster, which was George Washington Foster, so he has Courtview. So this was her wedding gift. So her father purchased this home, gave it to her and James Irvine when they got married. According to Virginia, it was too far from her parents. It was too far out of town. It was too far out of town, and she said it was haunted. So that's a good Halloween. We hadn't played on that yet, but she said it was haunted. So she signed her name in the back panel of glass in this central hallway with her diamond ring. Oh, wow. And left. And it passed through a few hands, and during the Civil War, it was occupied by both the Confederate and the Union armies. And at that time, I guess I should say, it was still a two-story porch, but it had like a shed porch that went across the front. And then this is the original kitchen that you'll see here, and it was detached. And then the house would have ended where the siding ended, and none of that was there. So during the Civil War, the basement was actually daylight out, and I haven't confirmed this, but they said they would hide horses, under the home, in the basement. But it was a great, because at the time, all this was open, so they could see the river. They could kind of have control of Florence if they had control, of Mapleton. So after the Civil War, you had Robert McFarland. And that, as you know, we're in like McFarland Estates right now. So when he bought the home, he ended up collecting about 400 acres in this area. And from what I know, all the way to the river, I mean, he had this entire hill. And it stayed in his family, I believe it was about 80 years. And I think the last McFarland was maybe his granddaughter, or Mary McFarland was the last McFarland to live here. So that would take us to about 1930 to 1940, when a family, the Slaytons, he was a dentist, and the Slaytons purchased this home. And at that time, I guess just being owned about 80 years, it had kind of come into some disrepair. So they came in and really started to modernize it. That's when they, it was wired, plumbing, they connected the kitchen. So they closed in the breezeway so the kitchen was connected. And then he built his dental practice on the front. So that's, a lot of people think that's the front of Mapleton, but that was added probably about 1940. So from the Slaytons, it went to the Campbells, which was a nephew. The Campbells sold it to the Warrens, and the Warrens, a lot of people remember it and have been here before. There was a lot of weddings during that time. I believe they had a wine shop in the front. The wine cellar started there. Warrens went to Dr. Mancuso, who was, he's kind of a history buff, had a lot of historic homes, and he had a practice over here and had always seen this home, fell in love with it, and he purchased it. But he's the one that had it up until us. So it really, for the age of the home, has not changed hands that many times, which I guess has also been part of preserving a lot of what's here. It was built, I guess I'll talk a little bit about in a federal architecture. So when you go inside, you have your central hallway, and then you'll see symmetry in each of the rooms. It's a mirror image on both sides and upstairs as well. Like I mentioned, that's the original fireplace. The original kitchen. The original cooking fireplace is still there. And a lot of people, we've had several people look at the trim work, because we would love to track down the craftsmen and the people who are responsible for that. I've read that there was maybe a South American crew that was moving through the areas at this time and did a lot of the work in these homes. We had somebody who, he specializes in a lot of trim work. He said he felt like the craftsmen probably educated and had plans and blueprints, but also they had a lot of their own touches here. George Coulter had them carve in books. You'll see on the kind of the fan as you go in the hallway, there's books carved in, because he had a big library at the time. So he has books carved in the trim work there, and in what we call the library, there's books around the fireplace. So it's very unique. We're fortunate, like I said, the history that's here, and since we have had the home, we have really tried to preserve. We worked on the basement, getting the moisture out, kind of stabilizing the structure, though it's in fantastic shape for the age. It was truly the men who built this, they built a solid home. The staircase, we just kind of tried to make sure that what's here stays. But we have hopefully plans in the near future of being able to open it up more and having it available for people to come in and enjoy this space is our hopes. So,
have you been able to find a lot of photographs?
I have maybe seen 4 to 5 photographs that were previous to 1950, probably. The earliest photograph I think I've seen was it was about when Mary McFarland was in the home. Somebody took a picture, and that's when you can see the shed roof.
The Depression period, they did those historic homes.
I think it was around 1930 that I want to say the picture that I saw.
Some of that's online.
Yes, so it's part of the reason I couldn't find a lot of the history. They spelt the man's name wrong. They spelt Coulter wrong. So I was looking for Coulter and he was Coalter. Once I made that connection, I was able to track his life. But if you search for this home, you have to look George Coulter, both spellings, or the McFarland home. And it is on the National Register. And even on at that point in time when it was registered in the 1980s, it was they said the best and possibly only example of Adam-esque architecture and trim work in the state of Alabama. And so that was in 1980.